this is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about this interview that Tim Pool had with Lance from the Serfs. I've seen the Serfs takes on Twitter. They're interesting. They're very interesting, to say the least, but today we're going to be talking about this interview that they had, and so we're pretty much going to be looking at this the whole entire time because it was like a 2-hour conversation, and there's some things that I want to show to go through, and I'm going to be playing long sections of it. I hope that I'm not, marked from YouTube because I'm streaming something live that's, their thing. But if I go dark for a minute on YouTube, you know what happened. Just come find me later. But I want to talk about this because I think Lance has such a good snapshot into their ideology, and Tim Pool kept saying that he was in a cult, and Lance didn't disappoint. So they talked about the recent man who was killed on the subway. They're calling him unhoused instead of homeless. That's the PC term now. Who what they're just saying that he was like a Michael Jackson subway performer when he was been arrested 40 times and pushed women and on like the rails, like attempted murder, all kinds of different stuff. And people are the protests are wild. I saw a video of someone who's on a train trying to get off, and they wouldn't let him get off on the stop, and they're trying to lecture him about like why they're doing what they're doing, and he needs to understand why they're doing what they're doing. He's just like, I want to go to work. So it's pretty remarkable. I'm like, how can people have this much time on their hands? I'm like, times must not be hard enough for people to keep doing stuff like this. But I'm like, but times are hard. So how is this possible? I think it's not hard for everybody, I guess. Maybe it's just the upper privilege of New York or wherever all these people are coming from. But I just, let justice be done. And if there is an injustice, go ahead and advocate, for justice after the fact. But let people do some investigations instead of trying to pressure people into doing the wrong thing. So anyway, they talk about that for a while. They talk about abortion, and so if you've been on the internet, if you've been on Twitter, maybe TikTok over the weekend, you've probably seen a portion of the of what I'm going to show you, because he said some wild, revealing things, and then they went into the trans debate a bit, and that's really why he was there, because that's what I've seen most of his tweets about. It seems to be the focus on advocating for trans rights. And then someone asked a super chat that I wanted to ask, because we're having this topic of bodily autonomy. And so someone asked the perfect question to further reveal the hypocrisy of his opinion, which is consistent with a lot of people who claim to care about bodily autonomy. So, this is going to take the whole entire show. I'm going to try not to go too long. I won't be commenting a lot because I think Tim did a really good job. I think Seamus, when he interjected, did a really good job. So I'm going to try not to say too much because I don't want to prolong these clips, because we're going to watch long segments of this. So I don't want to prolong it too much. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to my website, check out different content, different articles, different videos. I did just post like a segment from my book, Of Course God is Blatantly Against Abortion. It's actually the end of the book. Kind of like the wrap up, the conclusion chapter I just posted. It's called The Perspective of the Serpent, because someone said, left a comment that said, you're using your religion to try to limit choices, and that's what the devil wanted. And I'm like, I actually wrote a segment in my book that's like perfectly addresses it. So if you're interested in reading that portion, it's on my website. It's the last article that I published. You can't miss it, because when you go to the columns. And someone who I guess isn't religious did read it, and they're like, well, you didn't really address the point that you're using religion to control someone. It's not that I'm using religion to control anyone. Like we all debate our beliefs on whether or not you should be able to have laws regarding, like, we all think it's wrong to probably just kill innocent people, right? I think that's kind of a blanket thing. Well, that's a belief, right? And we base that on our rights. We believe we have a right to life, a right to not be killed. And so the argument with abortion is, why do you believe that's a life? People who don't believe it's a life, that's based on a belief, a very unscientific belief. The scientific position is, yeah, it's obviously alive. If you say, well, it's not a person, that's also a belief. Personhood is a philosophy, like philosophical concept. So we debate that, or people say, well, the woman's bodily autonomy should supersede their right to life. I don't know how you have rights at all if you really think that life isn't the number one that you prioritize. And that's a right to not be killed, not a right to not die. We don't have that. We're moral beings, right? If you're sick and you're dying, you can't, like, people bring up the kidney argument, like, oh, can the government force you to use someone else's kidney? It's like, no, you're dying. Like, you can't just forcibly take someone's kidney. But that's not the same thing as me chopping up you into little pieces or dismembering you to kill you. So, it's not analogous with abortion. So anyway, we could live in a purged society where there's no laws and everyone has extreme freedoms, but we recognize the benefit of having government is to ensure certain unalienable rights like life. So we limit ourselves a little bit so we can have, well, it seems like a lot these days, so we can have a government, but the purpose of the government, and this is going by the Declaration of Independence, is to secure our unalienable rights. So what's the first one that's listed? It's life. So my opinion, when the government doesn't protect the unborn, they're really violating their purpose. So it's really about, again, me making a religious argument that's what we all pretty much agree. Hey, you can't just murder who you want to. The argument with abortion is, why do we discriminate against these particular people, and is it just to deny them the rights? That's the argument, right? So and I can make those arguments all day without pulling out a single scripture. However, I wrote my book because I was sick of people like misinterpreting my stance and then misinterpreting my beliefs. So I covered it all. So anyway, you can check that out. Check out my book. It's available on Amazon. Check out different merch we have at the store. Let me show a thing or two because I want to jump into this. Like the You Are Not That Special. We got those in mugs. We also got the black tea mug, and also like that I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For shirt. So a lot of people really like that. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump in it. I don't have a meme. Let's just jump into it. So again, Tim Cass was talking to Lance from the Serfs. The Serfs is a pro trans, seems like kind of propaganda sort of Twitter page. I've only seen them on Twitter. I'm sure they have other content elsewhere. So he asked him to come on his he was commenting or something, and Tim Pool was like, come on the show. And he's like, yeah, let's do that. And so he did not do a very good job. Kudos, I guess, to him coming on. But people on the far left, I saw congratulating him on some stuff, and especially trans activists thought he did a good job. And I think that's really telling. Again, Tim kept saying you're in a cult, and he did not disappoint. So the abortion is where you'll really see him, the cult sort of training coming about. But we'll start with this recent story of the subway man who was subdued on the train. And again, I'm gonna try not to comment a ton, but I think it's important to watch this and kind of go, and I want to go through all these segments because ultimately I think it really, really speaks to an issue and a problem with this ideology. So let us watch together.
If you go back 7 years,
kills him, right? Kills him. He killed him.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when someone is being violent and then someone else acts in self-defense of others and the person dies in the process, now there's all of a sudden calls for, okay, so this guy should be criminally charged, but there was no call for stopping the 25 people being pushed on the subway tracks. That's an ongoing and acceptable thing, I suppose.
I'm never going to sit here and try and defend people pushing people on the subway tracks. That's a crime. Like, that's terrible.
Attempted murder.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if they die. So that's horrible. No one's going to be on the other side of that argument. But in terms of like the guy who just got killed.
I'm sorry. It's not especially attempted murder if someone dies. that would just be like straight up homicide. But yeah, let's keep going.
Isn't, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, doesn't in self-defense the proportionality of what you're doing has to be in response to the actual aggressive actions of the person, right? It has to be proportional. Is that correct? So you feel in your mind that it was a proportional response for him to choke him out to death in that situation because he was going to become such a threat to the person who choked him out.
But you made a big leap right there.
What's the leap?
You're ascribing intent to the Marine to kill.
Oh, I'm not saying that he intended to kill him. I never said that, but he did end up killing him, right?
That's immaterial.
What has to be material, Tim, has to be, is he doing what he's doing?
Proportionality argument, or are you making?
Yes, I'm asking you that because what he did proportional to the threat? Yes. So the threat that he was going to do.
It is proportional to subdue someone that is threatening other people and saying he'll die in the process.
And end up killing him, even if that was
see now you're doing it again. You're ascribing intent.
No, I'm not ascribing intent. I'm saying the results. This is what happened. The guy's dead. He's dead, right?
Results are immaterial to the proportionality of action.
So the proportionality of action in your mind was justified to what he was doing, his actual actions.
He held the guy on the ground while he said call 911.
And killed him. And choked him until he died.
You're doing it again.
No, you keep saying I'm doing it again. I'm saying this is the end results. I'm not saying this is what he meant to do. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. I don't know what's in his heart. Neither do you. None of us know what he meant to do that day when he woke up.
Absolutely. If someone is threatening other people, you are allowed to subdue them.
And then would it be like an involuntary manslaughter?
So see,
No, but this is what happened. It's to the point of death. So you have.
It's not a criminal.
It's not. I'm not saying he intended to kill him. That's the difference, right? But if he ended up dying as a result of that, was that proportional?
Yes.
He needed to be killed.
No.
Or he could have killed someone else.
Hold on. Stop that. You can't. You keep trying to say needed to be. No. But
that's what happened.
The Marine.
That's the end result.
So just gonna interject right here. So this story, I talked about this like when it was pretty much breaking, and what I find it. We can debate and see if he's going to be charged for involuntary manslaughter. We'll see, the Marine. And if he's charged for that, keep in mind that he wasn't the only one who subdued Neely. He wasn't the only one who did it. So would they charge all the men who participated, including, the non-white? Like Neely doesn't look like the guy who played Luke Cage, but if you look at the picture of him, like there's like a picture going around with him in a headlock, and it kind of looks like Danny Rand with his arm over like Luke Cage, and I'm like, they're gonna like try to crucify this white guy because he like curly hair like the actor from the TV show, and they just hated when that show came out. Because they're like, this is cultural appropriation. I'm like, no, Danny Rand is the Iron Fist. Like, that's the character. You can be mad that he's a white guy, but he's literally supposed to be a white guy. But anyway, they're calling it a lynching. It's very much a racial thing. They're very much taking the side. It's called just saying he was a subway performer, saying he's just a guy who was trying to couldn't take care of his mom, or was sad because he couldn't take care of his mom, or was upset because his mom passed away, or just all these sympathetic stories that I'm seeing from different news organizations. And it's like, this is also a guy who threatened people who's been harassing them for a long time. He's been arrested more than 40 times. Who's homophobic, I guess. There's a video of him throwing some homophobic slurs at people and stuff. So I'm not saying that it's a good thing that he's dead or that they should have tried to kill him, but he's trying to read it sounds like he's trying to read intent, but then he's like, well, even if he didn't intend to do that, but that it's still what happened. And so does that affect the proportionality of it? So what he's kind of saying is that the intent doesn't matter at all. It just matters what the end result was. And that's not how like our system works. People do weigh in intent to these things. So I've shown, I don't want to talk about this too long, but there's this graphic that I show you guys quite often about whiteness in America, and it lists all these ways that whiteness is affecting America and white culture and stuff. And so if you have these particular traits, like take time to like bookmark or like write it down or something if you haven't seen this, and go read through it. It is really, really a terrible infographic. And it was the African American History Museum that put it out, like the big like 4 level one in DC, like the Smithsonian and stuff. So they got so much backlash that they took it down. I don't know if they ever took down their webpage for it, but the internet's forever. I've had this. I like never delete this from my show notes and stuff. So there's some really good things in here about our society, like, you know, individualism and being polite and rational thinking and stuff. And so they're not saying that only white people can have these traits, but they're saying that if you do have these traits and you're not white, it's because you've been infected by white or impacted or whatever by whiteness in America. And the goal of that, I believe, is to say, if people aren't polite and they're rude and they're aggressive, or they want to, not protect your property or not respect your property rather, then don't judge them because they don't have your white values. So when you look at this, to me, it sounds like a lot like cultural Marxism, especially when you get to like the stuff about the idea of protecting your property is whiteness, and like intent matters and stuff. So I see that seeping into his conversation. Now, there's people who aren't like leftists who I love and follow, and who are, you know, upset about this case and believe that, you know, at least the man who put him on the chokehold should be charged. So again, we can debate whether he should or shouldn't be charged for manslaughter, but something that me personally, if I was on the train, I would appreciate it, men standing up to, you know, to someone who's threatening me on a train, saying they don't care if they're going to go back to jail and they're going to hurt people. They don't care. Like I watch videos all the time. I get so upset when there's people acting a fool and there's men just standing around and looking. I'm like, how come no one is doing anything? So this idea that it's okay to just act up and everyone is just supposed to take it, that is so frustrating to me. And I'm not saying that means you go out and you kill someone, but it doesn't seem like that was the intent, especially because after this is over, they did put him in like recovery position, and there was no intent there to actually have this result that has happened. So I think that's also important, but that's not something it's something I've seen on like a couple accounts on Twitter tweet, but it's not something I've really seen in the news. And I'm going to write a more in-depth article about this, but let's get back to their conversation.
Saying the Marine tried to kill him.
No, I didn't say that.
Then
you are saying that. I'm saying that. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm saying that's what ended up happening.
Let me respond. Then why would you say needed to be killed?
Because what he did to him, his chokeout ended up with the guy dying. So that was the end result. So his proportional response to what he thought was a threat was that I'm going to choke him out. I'm not trying to kill him, but I'm going to choke him out. Whether or not he dies is going to be something that we're just going to remain to be on the cards, right? This is chance. We'll leave it up to chance.
So you are making a huge leap right there.
There's no leap, Tim. Yeah, what he's doing is that proportional, is choking someone with the possibility of death. With the possibility of death.
Yes,
okay, so
absolutely.
So that's
I'll tell you this. Let me tell you. So if someone tried illegally entering my home,
sure,
I will use whatever force necessary to stop them from illegally entering my home, right? I have the legal justification in the state that I live in to use whatever force necessary to stop someone from entering my home illegally. Now, you can't invite someone in, and there's actually some legal barriers here. Like, if someone actually walks up to your house and the door is open and they walk in, that's actually not an illegal entry. Mm-hmm. It is to a certain degree, but it's like trespass. Sure. It's like your door was open, there was no obstruction, and then you'll make an argument about entering the domicile could be considered 4th-degree burglary, depending on which state you're in. If they actually open the door and enter, they've now committed felony burglary. And you are entitled in West Virginia to use whatever force necessary to stop someone from illegally entering your house. That doesn't mean you just intend to actually kill someone. So in terms of we're out in the street, someone is threatening someone else. You are legally entitled to subdue them. Now,
even if that in the act of doing that, you could kill them.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Because where you're going with it is like, what act of subduing would be permitted in your mind then? Like holding his hands tightly?
One that doesn't have a possibility of death, I would say, because
give me one in your martial arts expertise.
Zero, absolutely zero.
Okay, so there's
and I think I can contend that no one here has any, right? Am I in a judo room?
I just watched a lot of movies.
No, but
sharp elbows.
So he admitted that he's not aware of any way that has 100% possibility that no one will be killed or result in dying if you apply any sort of force. But and then he just tried to shift like no one here is an expert, right? Which they do that. He does that like a couple of times, but if you can't have any sort of form of self-defense because of a possibility of what might happen, like you have to take that into account, but you also have to, what could happen if someone is threatening you, saying they don't care if they go back to jail, and they're trapped in a train, and all these guys did was put him in a chokehold. Again, we know the end result, and I'm not saying that it's not tragic, but this idea that people can't like act at all and restrain someone, they didn't like punch him in the face and kick him in the groin or whatever. They subdued him.
but no, none of us have black belts. We don't know this shit. We're just a bunch of people who talk on the internet.
But not going black belts. I mean, I have hostile environment training, and I have some minimal martial arts training. Minimal. I've done some kung fu, taekwondo.
So once again, there's no experts here to talk about this.
Yeah. So certainly will contend I am not an expert. However, if someone is threatening harm against another person, and 3 people find it reasonable to subdue him, and the person dies, that person was in the process of committing a crime. If you lose your life in the process of committing a crime, I'm not going to blame the victims for this, right? Would you blame the victims for this?
When you're saying victims, you mean the people who killed him?
The people who are being attacked.
But were they attacked prior, or did they try to subdue him? Do we have footage before the event begins?
So in New York, for example, if you go up to someone and threaten them, you've committed a crime, right? You've committed a criminal act of violence against another person by threatening them and going up to their face, right?
And so you're saying at that point you have the ability to proportionally respond with violence.
Actually, there's a video of this. Myth Informed has it. 7 years ago, this man was called a hero for diffusing violence by putting another man in a chokehold. A man in the subway was getting up in people's faces, and he was threatening them, and another man got up behind him and put him in a chokehold, and he was put on national television, and he was celebrated as a hero for doing so. So this is what I'm talking about, anarcho-tyranny. I feel like you're latching onto this completely from a point of you don't have knowledge on proper technique for subduing an individual.
None of us do.
Nor the legal expertise.
None of us do as well.
But see that's kind of an absurd thing to just outright. Well, look, I'm going to say this guy committed a murder and should go to prison, but I'm not an expert and neither are you. Therefore, he should be convicted.
I never said that. I'm actually asking questions because these are.
But that's exactly what he's doing, though. That's exactly what he's doing. Again, Tim really did an excellent job dealing with him in this interview for sure. But yeah, that's totally what he's doing.
Are things that I don't fully understand about. Is it legal for him to do what he did?
Yes. That's why he wasn't
proportionally legal.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why he wasn't charged. He was released. However, in this day and age, what's likely going to happen is anarcho-tyranny. People go out in the streets, they protest, and the police say, for political reasons, we're going to go find this guy and we're going to arrest him.
But I don't know. It depends. Unfortunately, we don't have footage of what happened before the chokehold.
That's what I'd like to know.
But if there's enough people on the train that are witness to what was happening, and they're like, yo, he was threatening all of us, then I think the cops are not going to mess with that guy.
And that's what was reported. And there were 3 men trying to subdue him as he fought back. So there's no debate that this guy was acting violently and threatening people, and even said he was prepared to die. At that point, you have what could be a terroristic threat. I think if a guy got on a train and screamed, "I'm going to cause harm to people," and then said he was willing to die, you'd probably want to stop him, because there's signs all over the subway saying, if you see something, say something. And I suppose we could go the route of when Luke Rudkowski had that video. There was a guy in a subway with a knife stabbing people, and the cop said, "We're not going to get involved at all." And then some guy had to try and intervene himself. It's funny, that guy's a hero.
Yeah, that was, I think, oh yeah, here it is. Matt Walsh retweeted Alexandra Cortez's tweet from 6 hours ago and asking specifically, what are they supposed to do? What are people supposed to do in this situation? Are they just supposed to sit there? If someone's screaming, they're gonna hurt somebody. You just sit there and wait until they actually hurts the person and then you respond?
And I'm just curious, honest question. We have the story from the Daily Mail from October. 25 victims have been shoved in front of subway cars so far this year. 2 victims were killed. Where was the protest?
Well, where was the video footage of it?
There is video footage of it.
Is it public?
Yes.
Public video footage?
And I can't play it on YouTube, but there's video footage of people being pushed in front of trains. And where's AOC? Where's any of these protesters? Nowhere to be found. Anarcho-tyranny is that when the criminals do it, as explained in, was it Solzhenitsyn, the Gulag Archipelago? When a criminal does this act in the Soviet Union, that's just a criminal. That's what they do. But when you, the citizen, defend yourself, you knew better.
But so you're blaming AOC for not bringing attention to this specifically? So as
blaming?
In or you're saying that she's hypocritical because she doesn't talk about the people being pushed in front of trains, but she's talking about this now? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying hypocritical. No, I'm saying I have a question of why now? Why only when people are victimized and they defend themselves are we now upset about what happened on the subway?
You keep saying victimized. We're talking about a poor homeless person
who attacks people.
May have been having an episode and died in what ended up being the struggle. So why are the people who were subduing him victims? What makes them victims of this?
He assaulted them.
So you have that on camera that he assaulted them first.
According to all the news reports and the police and the witness statements.
Can we see the footage? I want to see. I haven't seen that yet.
I think we can show the choke out.
Okay, so according to the news reports, the witnesses and the police, he went and threatened violence against people, which is assault. And
right, but you're saying he specifically threatened violence against the people who subdued him. Do we have evidence of that? It's one thing for him to be in a train being like, I'm upset.
You're not winning an argument here.
I'm not trying to win an argument.
You're being awfully pedantic.
Awfully pedantic.
Yes.
Why would you use pedantic in this form? I'm trying to get to the root of this problem.
No. It's absurd to imply that if a guy walks up to a woman and says he's going to harm her, that another man can't protect her.
Right. And so this is why I'm asking: did he say to the people who subdued him, "I'm going to harm you.
Yes,
I'm going to hurt you"?
That's immaterial to a self-defense claim in proportionality.
Okay.
If this guy was threatening people, right? And then someone said, I'm going to stop you before you hurt someone. That is legal self-defense acting in the defense of others. That makes those people who are stopping the guy threatening people the victims of a violent individual who is trying to cause harm. See, I just find it fascinating that there's an effort to defend the aggressor in this circumstance. Right?
Oh, so you're suggesting that even if the guys that were choking out weren't the ones being threatened, that they're still considered a victim because they stepped in to defend other people?
Well, I'm saying outright that if you're on a train and there's a guy, you're on a train, you can't get off that train. You are trapped.
Yeah,
right?
I used to live in this area, by the way. I used to live in Flatbush. I used to take these trains every single day. I have seen this. I have seen this and worse. I have seen people in the middle of episodes where I was like, this person could potentially either harm themselves or harm me. It never crossed my mind that I need to choke them out to the point of potential death in order to protect everyone else on the train. That never even went through my mind. So that's why I'm asking you, do you have specific footage of him threatening the very people who subdued and ended up killing him?
But why does that matter?
I don't think there is footage.
But like, what is it?
All right. Well, then that's all I want to know.
So I just wanted to get to that part where he says that he's seen stuff like this on the train. He's like, I would never think of doing what they did. And again, it's pretty evident, at least from footage of them trying to put him in recovery when people got off the train and stuff, that they didn't have an intention for him to die. So that intent isn't there. The intent was just to subdue and to protect maybe himself, the man himself, and everyone else on that train. So him saying that it's never occurred to me to do that, maybe not choke, but like, again, I'm like, it frustrates me when I see videos and things of like people on the sub. I saw a video the other day of a crazy man on the train, and he was next to a woman, and she tried to move, and he grabbed her hair and made her sit next to him, and she's like whimpering, and they're just watching. People are just watching, trying to mind their own business. There was one guy who was like recording. He's talking about demons and praying and for him to release her, and I'm just like, oh, that's nice that you're gonna pray. Are you gonna like help her though? Like, I'm like, sir, I'm like, I don't think you putting this on the internet is I don't know, edifying right now, or uplifting the church or the gospel or whatnot, when it just looks like everyone's standing around while this woman is victimized. So that frustrates me. And I'm like, if I was talking to someone who was like, they should be charged for murder, etc. And I'm like, well, I don't believe that was obviously not their intent for that to happen. But I have to say, if I was in that situation, I would have appreciated those men stepping up to stop this crazy person from causing harm to anyone. I would have appreciated that if I were a woman on the train, so him saying like, I would have never thought to do that. I'm like, I bet you wouldn't. Bet you wouldn't. And it is very strange how much they are standing up for this criminal. And I think at one point he says something like, well, he's homeless. And they're like, well, we're not saying that he's a criminal because he's homeless. We're saying he's a criminal because he's been arrested over 40 times. He's pushed people, tried to push him in front of trains and all sorts of other stuff. I'm not going to play this part, but they also, I guess this whole 2 hours is worth watching, is worth me watching anyway. They did also talk about mental health, because he got on them like, why don't you guys talk about mental health? And like, we do talk about mental health. And Seamus made the point that people on the left, when they talk about mental health and pouring money into mental health, we might all be talking a different language on what will actually help people. Like, you had Ian who mentioned like, you guys might be talking about put more drugs into people. He said, I think people would be better off if they had less drugs. And Seamus is like, back in the day, we would lock people up if basically they couldn't take care of themselves, if they proved that they couldn't take care of themselves. And he's saying, I'm not saying that that's a metric that we should have today, but the metric today is you have to be like involuntarily committed or whatever. It has to be proven that you're a danger to yourself and other ones, people around you. But the problem with having that be the standard is that most likely that someone is harmed before you're actually committed. Now, I think, you shouldn't just kind of be taking people, I guess. But this is a man who was arrested over 40 times. Either he needs to be in jail, especially for pushing people in front of trains. You either need to be in jail, or if they're unwell, he needs to be in a mental institution. He should not have been on the train terrorizing people. And so this is a condemnation on the entire system. But people are trying to make it a condemnation on the Good Samaritan. And I don't like that. And I question, what is the end goal of AOC and the media and people are trying to paint it as a racial issue, and people trying to paint this as a class issue, like we just want to kill homeless people or something like that. People who are trying to characterize him as just a subway performer who'd like to do Michael Jackson and not focus on the fact that he was a dangerous person. So I question, like he said, narco tyranny, where people are like, oh, it's fine if the criminals do it, but if people who are good citizens, they knew better, how dare they? So I'm going to move on to the abortion segment, which was really wild. That's going to be a long segment that we watch, but it's well worth it. I'm pretty sure that you guys have probably seen some of the viral moments out of this before. And there's just nuggets all over here where Lance just like, it's just amazing how his brain thinks. But I hear stuff like this all the time, but it is like it is a flashlight. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Like this is sunlight. This is pure sunlight in this situation. So we're gonna watch it. Also, someone said they couldn't hear me. Someone said that they could hear me clearly. I tried to kind of fix what's going on. I can't do too much, or it might risk kind of messing up the broadcast. I think I just kind of need a new mic. But so if you guys like what I do here, blacktnews.com, you can go to the website and go hit that donate button and help the show for some of that overhead. So like I kept saying, like I need new equipment. I do need some new equipment. So if you would like to help, you can go to the website and give in that sort of way. Also, if you're watching on Facebook, you can do stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you can do super chats and stuff. But if you want to go directly to the website, that's, easiest way to help. So let's keep going.
Pro universal health care, not to the same degree as like Bernie Sanders. I believe in private health insurance, and I'm pro choice. I am absolutely not a conservative in this country.
I've listened to your debates on pro-choice, though. You're pro-choice from a Tim Pool's perspective. I
I'm
would say,
pro-choice from a traditional liberal perspective, as
but
traditional liberals
not
have
from
been.
what people who would define themselves as pro-choice would say, right? Like you concentrate very heavily
Right, listen.
on the 9th-month abortions and baby guillotines and stuff like that. Like
What?
Yeah. I remember watching you debate
Baby
about
guillotines?
Yeah. Okay. So baby guillotines is my own personal interpretation and joke of it. But you were talking about how women, how like disgusted you are that women may have an abortion in the 9th month, right? Or even
A viable baby.
of a viable baby
That could
and
live.
I wanted to scream at that time, being like, women who have abortions in the 9th month, they're not doing that because they got bored or all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't care anymore. They do that because it's a fucking tragedy. Like statistically, women who are getting abortions in the 9th month, it's because there's a medical complication that could kill them. That's why they have to do it.
So Seamus, everyone's gonna mention that he's false, that's false, that he's wrong, and he's gonna keep mentioning this stuff over and over again. But I do want to address this idea, like, oh, they just got bored, like. That's a caricature and a mischaracterization of when people on the pro-life side talk about abortions out of convenience or women doing it late term and stuff, and like, oh, she just got bored with her pregnancy. No one is saying that, but a lot, if you look up reasons why women say that they have abortions late term, women can have similar reasons for abortion late term that they would early. So if a woman doesn't want to be alone raising her child and it's at week 12, don't you think it's possible that she might be pregnant at, like, you know, in the 6th month or something, or 5th month or 7th or whatever, and then her boyfriend leaves her and dumps her, and all of a sudden she doesn't think that she can do it. And you might be like, why does she give it up for adoption? Who knows? But some people don't want to give it up, their baby up for adoption, because they don't want to wonder what life what their child is doing out in the world. So they'd rather, I guess, eliminate them and eliminate that thought, which is crazy, because sooner or later you might wonder what they would be like if they were alive and had lived. So and if not today, if not tomorrow, maybe 5 years down the line, or 10 years or 20. Like, I saw a video of a woman on TikTok. They have a teenage filter on there, and she just started bawling, crying, because she had an abortion. And she said, this is what I imagined that my daughter would have looked like, you know? And so, and she came to, like, grips with God and, you know, believed that she was forgiven for what she had done, but it still caused such a wound within her. So, nobody thinks that women are doing it for funsies, which there's some activists say some crazy stuff and have done their stuff on camera for whatever reasons, but no, if you think it's legitimate for a woman to have an abortion at any reason early, she may have an abortion later for the same reasons later. Or some women don't find out that they're pregnant until late in their pregnancy. So if people want to compromise, like people try to go by weeks, to me that doesn't make sense. I've said this before. If you want to compromise, you should compromise it at reasons, not time limit. And people don't want to do that because they just want to be like, I don't know, ambivalent, I guess, and not care that much and just be like, oh, just whatever she chooses. But when you say whatever she chooses, you have to come to terms with a grip with the fact that she might make a decision that is kind of sick. I've had people debate me and say, like, if I have a one-night stand, I should be able to have an abortion. And if you support her choice to do that, you're standing by her choice to do that. Like, pro-choice isn't a neutral stance. I gotta play this video because I cannot keep ranting. It's a long clip. We gotta watch it.
What do you
False
mean
argument.
False. That's the real world.
I already said viable. Try again.
What are you talking about, Tim?
I already said abortion of viable fetuses at 9 months.
This is ridiculous.
Do you know what viable means?
Yes.
It means the baby can survive on its own without medical complications.
Absolutely. And
why legalize abortion of
Spoiler alert, he does not know much about viability. You will see that later.
viable fetuses at 9 months when the baby could just be
women
delivered?
are not getting abortions at the 9th month for pleasure or because they want to suddenly do it for kicks. No, that doesn't happen.
Why
It's a
legalize
tragedy.
it?
It's
Why
a
legalize
tragedy
it?
of
Why
the
legalize
highest
it? Why legalize it?
because there are medical operations that could kill the mother and they need to get an abortion.
Why legalize?
I just told you that's the reason why.
So all right, I'll try and break it down for you. Can the baby survive? Let's talk about a baby. The baby can survive on its own. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Abortion is defined by Planned Parenthood and the law as terminating the life of the baby.
Correct.
Why terminate the life of the baby if it can survive on its own?
Because it could kill both of them. That's why it is done at that stage.
So how
it could
do you
kill
how do
one
you
or
get-
the
how do you
other,
get
and
the
they
baby
have to
out?
make the tough decision at that point.
So I'm going to interject right here because they don't say this outright. They do debate him really well, and again, kudos to Tim. But if you are having a late term abortion later in your pregnancy, it's not something that can be done instantly. It's something that can take days. I had a dear friend who had a 2-day procedure, and she didn't have a medical reason. Like she wanted a blank slate, and it ended up being a gruesome, horrific, traumatic abortion that she does regret. So be careful what you want and what you think and wish for, or whatever. But there, if you do it later than that, it could be a 3-day. It's you're you're preparing the cervix at a time it's not ready to deliver, and so it takes days if you're going to have a late term abortion. If you're having a medical emergency, it is safer for them to try to induce the abortion, especially when you may have only a little bit time to live. It doesn't make sense. Like a C-section, they can do that with it, prepare that in a couple minutes. But to have it come out of you, like in a natural sort of birth, or give birth to some of it, and then like do like a partial birth abortion, like break the baby part. It's horrific. It takes time to do that. So this idea that they have to kill the baby at 9 months so the woman will live or they'll both die, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Like if he was arguing that women might have a late term that late because the baby has like some kind of terminal illness that they have no chance at life or something, that's a different argument. But even still, like at that point, you might as well like there's prenatal hospice and stuff, and you might as well like try to have those couple moments. But that's a deeper issue, and not what he's arguing. He's just delusional.
So how do you remove the fully formed 9-month baby at that point?
Oh, I don't know the science of it. I've never performed that operation
So
before.
shouldn't the law then be, if the baby must be removed and it is alive and capable of survival, all actions must be taken to preserve the life of the child and the mother?
I would say they'd probably choose the mother first, right?
Why?
And this is such a strange scenario. How often do you think that this happens and all of a sudden they're like, the baby could have lived. You could have done it. Why did you choose the other option? It's like, this is a tragedy of the highest order because they want to have the kid. At 9 months pregnant, a woman is on her way to give birth. So it's like, it's the worst possible fucking thing that could happen to her.
That's not always, again, I said I didn't want a dogpile, but that's statistically not true. There have been surveys done on women who are a pretty large sum of them. It's because they were not sure whether the father of the child was willing to commit. And then when they found out he wasn't willing to commit, they would have the abortion. And so there are different stats you're going to find for different points in pregnancy. When it comes all the way along to 9 months, I don't have the statistical data on that. However, I do know for later term abortions, there are reasons other than what is traditionally considered to be a medically necessary reason. For example, some people will say that a negative mental health outcome is a reason to abort a child later in pregnancy. So if the woman is depressed, they will list that as a reason for why the child had to be terminated to save the life of the mother, which is certainly not the case, very obviously. And to the point of what Tim is saying, when we say there's no...
So health can be very broad. Just FYI, when we talk about health of the mother, there's a difference about talking about life of the mother, or states will have like life of the mother and like severe kind of like body impairment or something that they have the baby. Like in Ohio, there was a big story about the 11-year-old who went out of town to have the abortion, and turned out it was like her mom's illegal boyfriend, and but she could have actually had the abortion done in the state because at 11 it's possible that that could do like permanent harm to her body. So there are exceptions, not just for the life. In some case, well, every state that has abortion restrictions has carve-outs for life of the mother. I don't know if all of them have I would assume, but I don't want to say for sure. We'll have carve-outs for like situations like that, if there could be some kind of major bodily harm. I would assume so. But when people talk about health of the mother and they write those into like different bills and stuff for exceptions, health is so broad. It could be mental health. It could be, but it could also be like financial health, things like that. So you got to be careful about how these things are defined. And sometimes people do it so broadly because they want as many, they want to have as many abortions as possible. So just want to add that in there.
No such thing as a medically necessary abortion. The principle behind that is if there is an operation which is necessary to save the life of the mother, and then she miscarries the child as a result of that operation, which was necessary to save her life, that's not an abortion because nobody's intent was to go in there and end the life of the unborn child. And so if a woman's having complications where she has to deliver early, you deliver the child early, of course. And if you're at a point in pregnancy where the child isn't viable, that's a horrible tragedy. You still do what you can to save the child, but you can't always save the child, and we understand that. But to go in and rip the child apart to end their life is never something which is medically required, even though an early delivery may be.
But are there situations where if the baby is this is so harsh, in its complete form, that even trying to induce early pregnancy could kill the mother, so they have to break the baby's body apart so that they can get it out without killing the mother?
I've never heard of such a thing.
So,
and there are letters, by the way, signed by literally thousands of doctors who have said this.
Let me ask. Can
I just say one thing? So 88% of abortions are in the first 12 weeks. 88.
Yeah.
88% of abortions. Less.
So they're gonna get him on that. A little context, because how they're about to dig him. They did talk about guns earlier, and so he's not. I think he likes to shoot guns, but he's not fond of our gun laws and stuff in America. And they talk about like mass shootings a little bit and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. But I hate when I'm having a conversation and they're like, well, 88% or whatever are done in the first trimester. I'm like, Seamus certainly doesn't care, because first of all, they're having a conversation about late term. So to be like, well, it only rarely happens. That's really not the point. Seamus and myself, we don't believe in like abortion at any stage. We don't, it's the same baby. It's the same baby. So I don't care if you're talking about it. I think it's definitely, I guess you could say, crueler, especially what he's saying, basically that if it's at 9 months, you gotta kill it if that's what the woman wants. And he'll pretty much say that, and not quite that language, but pretty much that language, like a stone, like a hair's away from basically saying that. But yeah, I don't care when people switch all this up and they're like, well, it's just 88, it's just a small percentage that's done so late. I don't like them at any point, but his statistic there is irrelevant to the conversation, because I believe he's the one who brought up the late term, the baby guillotines or whatever. So
then 1.3% of abortions take place near the 8th or 9th month.
How many abortions
is that Guttmacher?
Well, how many is that?
I don't know the actual numbers. This is the percentages.
13,000.
Okay, but we're talking about less than 1.3%.
Hold on, 13,000. That's the number of people who die from gun violence in the U.S. each year that aren't suicides.
Gentlemen,
so that's
I am
13,000.
not here to justify abortion when it happens, as in it's a good thing.
No.
I don't celebrate
Brother,
it.
You're saying it doesn't happen.
No.
You're saying
I
it doesn't
never
happen.
said
It happens 13,000 times.
I said it's extremely. There is 338 million Americans. I'm sorry. The numbers are going to be a little daunting. Yes, the numbers will be high.
Well,
I'm not here to celebrate that.
I don't understand your argument then.
My argument is that there's a lot of human
13,000
beings.
people die from guns, we have a problem, right?
If 13,000 people die from guns, we have a problem. Yes, of course.
If 13,000 late-term abortions happen, is that a problem?
These are completely different things.
Well, how so?
Okay, so if someone dies by a gun, have they been shot? Were they killed? Did they kill themselves? Was it a suicide? Was it a gang violence thing? Who knows?
That's a good question.
Can I clarify? I don't want to argue. I just want to clarify.
I need to answer this.
Well,
In the case of
can I address what you just said?
yes, but in the case of late-term abortions, more often than not, when statistics say, and when they are polled, they say the reason that they are giving it is because it's a medical complication that could result in the death of the mother or the child.
All right. So let's. Can we make the argument then that the use of guns on people are allowed?
The use of guns of people are
To end their lives is allowed.
So that's murder. You're describing murder.
So if Colorado, for instance, passes a law saying there is no medical requirement for an abortion, is it wrong to kill the baby?
You're talking about You're trying to compare murdering someone with a gun to a woman having to make a medical decision that could basically preserve her life.
No. I said not a medical reason. That's what I'm saying.
So I'm going to obviously let them finish, but yeah, this idea that the people get so up in arms, they try to dismiss, like, again, like the 13,000 babies. That's not the number that are killed in abortions. There's like 1 million in the U.S. about every year, right? So if you get 13,000 that are killed like late term or after the first trimester or whatever, and you have so many that are being killed at a point in time where they undebatably have feelings and other, like, how is that not cruel and wrong? But we'll have the summer of love, believing that police are going out hunting Black people with the BLM riots and stuff, when the numbers during that time, like the unarmed Black people killed by police is like, the number is like 20, if it gets that high, like a year. And so that was worth all the, property damage that we had, the lives that were killed, the chaos that ensued. All of that was apparently worth it. And, regardless of, and just because you're unarmed doesn't mean that it wasn't justified. And so you have to look at each case by case basis or whatever, because they could have been trying to take a gun, they could have thought that they had a gun, whatever. You really have to look at each case by case. If those things are alarming, if 20 men dying we perceive to be unjustly is alarming, why isn't 13,000 babies that are being broken apart unjust, that could live if they were just delivered? Why is that not alarming? And they'll get into like there's other medical reasons that people might say other than like life of the mother, but it could be Down syndrome. It could be, there's a person who I'm mutuals with on TikTok. Their doctors, thought she had a particular condition and wanted her mom to abort super late, and her mother didn't do it, and she was just a dwarf. She's a dwarf. She's just like a short person. And there's a person I follow who had a baby. Her son's name Ollie. He had a deformed foot. The foot's like this. It was like that. And she said the doctors coerced her. She lived in the UK. And the doctors were like, oh, people get abortions for less than this. Like, and they're like, oh, well, you're a single woman. Like, tried to like do these Jedi mind tricks on her to discourage her, to make it like more acceptable to do this. And so she defines it herself as her doctor was coercive. So she ended up having her son. They amputated the foot that was like this, and they gave him a prosthetic, and he can climb and run and do things that other kids do. He has a disability, but he's abled and he's alive, and his mother loves him, and it seems like she's with someone else. So she has support. So when people think that folks are just doing stuff, medical reasons, late term, it doesn't mean that it is a huge quality of life issue. It doesn't mean that child's not compatible with life. It doesn't mean that the mother's going to die. It's so broad. It is so broad. So I know people don't want to think of doctors doing those things. I know people don't want to think of women making decisions like that, because it is very disturbing, I think. That's why people don't want to believe that women would have late-term abortions for reasons other than like what he keeps saying, a tragedy. It disturbs us because it's disturbing. Yeah, he's going to justify any reason.
Should she have the ability to have an abortion for any reason? Yes.
At 9 months.
At 9 months, I would say at 9 months, because it only happens according to the stats based on complete medical necessity. She has a right to do it.
No.
She should have a right.
Hold on. Colorado legalized abortion up to 9 months with no medical reason required. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that decision, yes.
So the baby could survive on its own, and the mother is legally now allowed to just end its life.
She has the right if she wanted to. You're saying so in Colorado, and
it's not a trick question.
I know, but I'm asking you because you're the one who brought this up. I don't know what Colorado specific law says. So if you were saying that in Colorado women have the ability at 9 months to have an abortion for any reason. They could just decide that they're
Elective,
bored.
yeah.
Okay, I think they should have the right to do that, but the stats show that they're not doing that. But they should have a legal right to do that. Yes, it's their body, it's their choice, of course.
So this is what I disagree on. I think if the baby needs to be removed from the woman, there's no reason to kill it. You know what I mean? Like you could just C-section and then put it for adoption.
But I'm telling you that doesn't happen.
But it does. But hold on. Like
he's just in flat out denial. Like again, Tim Pool said he was in a cult. Lance didn't disappoint. I tell you, he didn't disappoint. He's just in denial. He's just in denial. You can go read studies following women and their reasons why they have an abortion, and it doesn't matter because he still supports women being able to do it for any reason. For any reason.
Like you might be able to bring up anecdotes, but the stats don't say that.
But hold on. Like, why allow it to happen? I just don't understand. Are you arguing? Hold on. Are you arguing you oppose it, and you think it's morally wrong, but you think it should be legal?
I think that women should have the right to decide what they do and have bodily autonomy over their own bodies.
We're not talking about her body. We're talking.
It is her body. Of course it is. At 9 months, even if it's still inside her, it's still her body. Even if it's a viable baby, it's still her body. We're talking about the
removal of the baby. Yes.
The forceful removal of the baby, or
forceful.
So she chooses to have that.
The woman says the baby must be removed from my body. Why kill the baby if they're removing it?
I don't think they should do that. I would if they ask me, Lance, should I do this? I would say no, but she should have a right. Yes, of course. It's her body still. That doesn't stop.
So like the woman is pregnant, the baby is viable and capable of surviving on its own.
Sure.
And she says before it breaches oxygen, kill it. Do you think that should be allowed?
This is again the baby guillotines. This is why I brought that up. But what a weird scenario. This doesn't happen. This is not the real world.
But it does. And if the argument is that it doesn't happen enough for you to care, that's fine. You're allowed to believe that.
Sure.
What I don't understand is it seems like your position is a rather shocked position where you recognize there is something inherently wrong with taking the life of a baby that could survive on its own, but you're also taking the tribal position of women should be allowed to do it anyway.
No. If you were to ask me, Tim, hey, Lance, do you think it's a good idea if this woman who's 9 months pregnant, suddenly she got bored with the pregnancy, she doesn't want to have it anymore, but the baby's viable? Do you think that's a good thing to do? I would be like, no, of course not.
Then why should it be allowed?
False framing. No one says because she got bored. That's a long time to get bored to put up with the baby, whatever. That's not why women have late-term abortions, and it's not what we claim happens. It is a misrepresentation of what we feel, what we think in reality. No one is doing it because they're bored. But if a woman, again, her boyfriend breaks up with her and she wants to have an abortion and doesn't want to give it up to adoption and be like thinking about like, oh, what could my child be doing or whatever, he supports that. So women can have sympathetic situations. I don't really think there's good logical explanations to support the pro-choice argument. I really don't. I think the most compelling ones are, I guess, a lot of these untruths that they convince themselves of. No one would do this, but anecdotes, like anecdotal stories of really harsh situations and women being in those positions, because we empathize with each other. We share each other's pain, and people think about themselves being in those positions, and that's why they're like, I don't want to make things too hard on her. She should be able to do that. So they just have this blanket authority to do that. But the question is, even though it might be hard, it might be difficult, if they can both live, and if the baby is viable, why take the time to execute them just because that's what she desires at that point? That doesn't make any sense. But that's what he's supporting. So many people think that being pro-choice is a neutral stance. It's not. Let me say this. I gave this like an example in my book, and I think I said this the other day, but stop Asian hate, like hate crimes against Asians, it's high, right? Imagine if everyone in the country was like, it's a fundamental right to be able to commit violence against them. What if we all decided that? And there's nothing that the police can do to protect them because it's a fundamental right to do that. We've decided that we can discriminate against this group of people, and it's our fundamental right to do that. Now I can say, well, I wouldn't personally go out and harm them myself, but I support everyone else's right to do that. That's what this is like. That's what being pro-choice is like. Now, it's not totally analogous because the baby is inside the woman. So there's a conflict of rights there, but it doesn't make the scenario he's talking about when they can both live, when the baby has to come out of them, out of her. It doesn't make sense to not at the abortion at this point in time would would take more time and be more brutal. Like you might as well just have the baby. You might as well just have a C-section or something. Like it doesn't make any sense other than that's what she wants. So do it. And he's cool with that. Like, well, cool's a strong word because he doesn't like it, but he's okay with it happening just because of bodily autonomy, because of the choice, whatever. And we'll get to that. We will get to the inconsistency there. But this is crazy. And again, well, let me say this. What he's talking about, and if people agree with this, why exactly is Kermit Gosnell in jail? I know why he's in jail. Most people are like, he's a monster. If you don't know who Kermit Gosnell was, he was an abortion clinic doctor, and he would induce the labor. His clinic was filthy. They did a movie called Gosnell. The only person I can think who's in it, who I know the name of actor, Dean Cain was in it. But he had an abortion clinic, like in Philadelphia, I think it was, and it was filthy. It was disgusting. They had cats roaming the halls. There was piss on the walls and floors. They had waste everywhere. People would go there for abortions and leave with STDs. That's how disgusting his clinic was. So I don't think you would go there necessarily if you had a medical emergency, but he would get recommended all the time, and they weren't looking at his clinic too much. You know, they didn't check him for like regulatory stuff or whatever. And so, but women would go there and be recommended to go there because he did late-term abortions. And so his staff was instructed that they would induce the labors of the women and then snip the spines of the baby. Now, he thinks that you shouldn't kill them after they're out, but what does it matter if it's like 5 minutes before it's born, that if the woman says, yeah, you got to kill it, like you're honoring that intention. So does it really matter if it's just a few inches of skin? And he's like, the difference is that it's forced birth. That's so crazy. It's so crazy. It doesn't, at that point, the baby has to come out of you. It always has to come out of you. But Tim's thing is like, why have that intention of harm to carry that point? And his answer is that's what she wants. You just got to do that. If that's what you want. And you know what? This is the same reason. It's the same reason why Democrats voted against the Born Alive Act. It's the same reason why they voted against the Born Alive Act, because they don't want to, as Obama said back when he voted against a bill that protected babies when they survive abortion, he was against it. And he was against it. Well, one, to be fair, he said he believed that doctors would just perform care to the kids, which again, people like Gosnell exist, so you can never be too certain. But he also said that he was concerned that the intention of the bill was to hinder the original intention. What is that original intention? To kill that child. What does it matter if they survived? The fact that this law could exist, that you have to save someone if they survive, is a reminder that you tried to kill them. That's why they don't support bills about babies who survive abortion. And that's why every Democrat except one in Congress voted against their recent bill. And they talk about it a little bit. It's clear that like they didn't really have a grasp of the recent one that really happened, but he didn't know anything about it. And then he ends up later reading a stat, like not a stat, but like because he claims that he would have been for the bill. But then he restarts reading a perspective from a leftist side or something about how it's deceptive. So I think he probably ultimately would have been against the bill after he got his proper talking points. But again, Gosnell is a monster, but how is what he's saying and advocating for, and people who agree with him, how is it less monstrous? How's it less monstrous just because of a few inches of skin? Like, spare me.
Because it's still her right. It's still her body.
But
bodily autonomy doesn't stop at my morality. Tim, it's not my choice. Right? It's not my, yes, but that's not my choice.
Why kill it? Why kill it?
That's her choice, not mine.
Why kill the baby?
Ask her. Ask her.
Okay. So my point is simply this. You don't need to be shocked by it. You are allowed to have that moral position. I think most people in America would prescribe that to be, would ascribe evil to that.
Sure,
But that's the idea.
You can ascribe evil to whatever you want. That's up to you. That's your choice.
The idea that you would say
doesn't mean that she should
the
legally
woman
be
wants
restricted.
the baby removed, and then in the process, instead of letting the baby live, remove it but kill it. Right? There's no reason to do that. You can give the baby up for adoption. You can drop the baby off on the doorstep of a post office.
I agree with you. I'm not disputing
So why
that.
legalize? Even if it's one, why legalize? You see, this is the craziest thing.
Because her autonomy should not be cut off based on your morality. Because you don't think that idea is good. You don't like it.
But the baby's been removed from her body.
Well, that's if it was removed from her body and it was still viable. Right? And that's where the baby guillotines come in, because I don't think this happens. I don't think women on the 9th month get abortions with viable living children and then be like, I don't want it, kill it. I don't think that happens.
You don't have to think it happens, but statistically it does, because your entire argument is this only happens for reasons of the health of the mother or the health of the unborn child.
I said,
so you believe it only
I said the
happens because
statistics show that at the 9th month, if a woman is going to have an abortion, it's typically because it's a medical complication that could either endanger her or the child's life.
And what I am
well,
saying
let
is
me-
there
let
are
me-
doctors who will justify that by saying the medical complication is she is depressed. That is literally one of the reasons given in surveys of women. And another reason that is given is that I didn't know if the man who I was going to be with.
Okay, but Seamus, I got to stop you because this is a nebulous argument that doesn't get anywhere, and I can respect the point that if you go to if you try and look this up, you're going to find left-wing sources and right-wing sources that will contradict each other. So my question is strictly on the legality of terminating the life of a child. I can sit here and pull up, oh, hey, here's one. Women abort Down syndrome babies late term rather frequently. I think that's wrong. I don't think that someone's life is forfeit because they have Down syndrome. But your argument is that they do.
No, it's not. That's a strong.
No. Your argument is that women have a right to terminate a baby for any reason at any point.
Yes, they should have the bodily autonomy to make that decision.
So what I'm saying is, in the circumstance of Down syndrome, I think it is wrong to terminate a baby's life at 9 months simply for having Down syndrome, but you would agree she is legally allowed to do so.
I think she should be legally allowed to do so. Whether or not I think that's a good idea is irrelevant.
Well, then there's the clarification. I think it should be illegal.
Okay.
I think
So there are limits to how much bodily autonomy women should have.
So yes, right.
So that's your stance.
The pro-choice argument, because you're pro-abortion, right?
Sure.
Pro-choice traditionally in this country put limits at around like 15 to 16 weeks, meaning if the baby is dependent upon the body of the mother, then it is the body of the mother and she has final say. If the baby is viable, it can be removed in a process that ends the pregnancy but doesn't end the life of the baby. That's kind of like the compromise where the baby gets to live and the woman no longer has to be pregnant. There seems to be this amoral argument where, well, but it just kill the baby anyway, which doesn't make any logical sense. That's the pro-abortion side. So if you go back to the 90s, if you go back to safe, legal, rare, et cetera, if you even look at Tulsi Gabbard in 2020, that's where I'm at. Conservatives are pro-life outright. Seamus would argue abortion in any capacity should be banned entirely. I'm in the traditional Democrat position. But you see, there is a tribal, amoral, illogical position of just let them kill the baby regardless. I don't see any logic there. I don't see how that makes sense morally or ethically or just mathematically.
Right. So you said I'm pro-abortion. What I'm against is forced birth. And I don't think the state should be forcing women to give birth against their will, which is what your position and your position is as well. So I'm against that. I think that's creepy big government shit. I don't think they should be forcing them and turning them into these viable wombs against their will.
I completely agree. I'm against forced birth, just like you.
Cool.
Except my difference is that if the baby's at 8 months and can survive, they can take the baby out as if they would have an abortion, but not kill it in the process.
If it's a viable at 8 months, is it viable?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is viable at 8 months, dude. There have been babies after 20 weeks.
Bro,
that
your
have
whole
been-
position is that women have a right to kill the baby even if they end the pregnancy, and there's no logic there.
The logic is that
So I told you he was unaware. It's saying, oh, they're viable at 8 months. Like, okay. And he also doesn't understand the procedure of how they would actually do a late term abortion either.
I don't think you agree with forced birth at a point.
How?
How at 8 months? At 8 months, Tim Pool thinks forced birth is fucking cool and poggy.
Stop making up stupid bullshit.
But
dude.
No,
hold on.
That's what this is.
Bro.
This is 100%.
Nonsense,
100% forced birth.
nonsense statement.
No.
Because I already said I agree with you.
No,
a woman,
you
a
agree with
woman
me
should
up
be
to
able
a
to
point.
end her pregnancy
You
whenever she
agree with
wants.
me up to 8 months,
A
Tim.
woman could end her pregnancy whenever she wants. Say it. Tim Pool said a woman can end her pregnancy whenever she wants. Stop.
I demand you
aborting
say
and giving birth are both
you
ending a pregnancy.
make up something fake. Tim Pool agrees with forced birth is a false statement. You're lying. I have already said I believe that women have a right to terminate their pregnancy to a certain amount of time.
At 8 months is where you draw the line.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you just said that. If the baby is viable, that she shouldn't have the right to be able to terminate it.
To kill the baby.
Yes.
I said she can end the pregnancy whenever she wants.
And ending the pregnancy can be giving birth or aborting the
or
baby.
a C-section that keeps the baby alive.
She has to be forced to give birth against her will in a C-section, but the baby is viable and they give it off.
So how do they remove the baby?
So hold on.
at 8
Either way,
months?
the baby comes out of her. You're saying that it's more.
So you literally want forced birth. You literally want to force women to give birth against their will.
So
Can I just
you're saying
interject here?
Yeah.
Can I please
you're
just
saying they should use the tools to rip apart the body and pull that out. Whereas I'm saying they should just take the baby
I'm saying
out.
she should have the right to decide what happens to her body. That's it.
Okay, but either way, the child is coming out. You're making this argument about forced birth. Either way, what is in her body is going to be outside of it. The question is it okay to shove forceps into the skull of the small person who's inside of her and then tear them apart limb by limb to get them out? Or should we say, no, that's not an acceptable way of delivering a baby. You shouldn't kill that unborn child. How is that for either way it comes out of her body? Either way the child comes out of her body. It's not as if there's one scenario where the pregnancy magically disappears and doesn't leave the body.
Let me add, forced birth is a nonsense politics statement.
But in your scenario, she's being forced to give birth against her will. Like she can't
She's
decide.
already pregnant, dude.
I know, but
we're not talking about forcing her to do anything. She's pregnant.
But then endorse that position.
I did.
Stick by it.
I know. I reject there's no such thing as forced birth. They're saying you can't kill that baby.
Let me tell you how fascinating this is.
Because she has the baby inside her.
Is so
yes, she does.
fervent about legalizing the killing of a baby at 9 months that I can sit here and say I think women should be able to terminate their pregnancy whenever they want. But if the baby is viable, there's no reason to kill it.
She has to be forced to give it. Then she has to be forced to give birth and then give the baby up. Is what you're saying?
Give birth. Define.
Yes. Okay. So that is forced birth, right?
So
she can't decide to terminate it at 8 or 9 months.
Define give birth.
You just said at 8 months if the baby is viable.
I didn't say 8 months. Define give birth. I'm trying to understand what you're saying by forced birth. What does birth mean?
You just said when she is at 8 or 9 months. Okay, so she's at 8 or 9.
I said viable.
Okay, so it's viable. The baby's viable. She should have to give birth to it in some capacity. C-section, whatever.
Define birth, and I can answer your question.
Birth, the removal of a child into the world from a mother's womb.
So how do they do that?
The woman pushes the baby out.
So then what would you call an abortion at 8 months? Is the woman pushing the baby out?
No, it's most likely a medical procedure done by a doctor.
And what is that medical procedure?
An abortion.
But what is that?
What is an abortion?
Yes, like what?
How is it done?
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure how it's done at 8 months. I know earlier on it's usually done with a series of tools. I don't know how it's done at 8 or 9 months.
Okay, so your moral argument is forced birth. I'm trying to understand what your position is. If you don't know how an abortion is done, then are you in favor of forced birth?
So, this is anyone getting like Matt Walsh? What is a woman? Vibes from that. Define birth. What is an abortion? And just not knowing at all what he's talking about. So just to make it clear, in case it's not clear, once a woman is pregnant, the baby exists. The abortion doesn't undo it. It has to come out one way or another. They say forced birth doesn't really exist. I think abortion is actually forced birth because it is an act of force, an act of violence, and then the baby comes out of you. But the goal is to kill the baby and then expel the baby. And why is it that they don't just induce the baby and if they live or whatever? There are people who have the position of they're pro-choice, but they believe in I'm trying to think of what it's called when you just basically expel the baby, and if it lives, it lives. If it dies, it dies. If someone knows, you can put in the comments. But there's a particular ideology, but they don't do that though. That's not how they do abortions. They don't like expel the baby, and if it lives, it lives. Or dies, it dies. They make sure. They make sure that it is dead first. You can possibly survive, but the intention is clear. And he's saying that if the mother's intention is that baby should die, then they should die. And even if it comes out one way or another, like you're forcing them to give birth because you have to honor her intention of that baby being killed. And again, if that's how you feel, like, is that too far off from Kermit Gosnell? Because he just did it the quick way of like, inducing them and then snipping their spines. He's saying if the woman wants them dead, they should be dead. It's just crazy. I got to get to this part. I'm playing the segment so long because I'm trying to get to there's a section in here that's super, super viral, where his body autonomy argument starts to crumble. But there's a section here later where it's more apparent that he has no respect for bodily autonomy.
Am I in favor of forced? No, I'm against forced birth.
But you think that women should have to expel the baby, right?
It's completely fine for me not to know the medical procedure of how abortion is done to stand up for the rights of a woman's body. I don't need to know how people perform abortions directly. I'm not going to lie here. I'm not going to pretend.
Removing a baby from a woman's body is birth.
Oh, so you're saying it doesn't count?
No.
It's birth of a different nature.
I don't think you have a definition, and I'm trying to understand what you mean by forced birth. But if you can't define the removal of the baby in a different way, I don't know what you're saying.
Birth, Tim, like the birth of a child.
So is a C-section a birth?
Sure. Yes, it is a form of extracting a living child that is viable to live in the real world.
That's how you define birth: extracting a living child to live in the real world.
No, I would define birth as someone giving birth. They are pushing a baby out of their body.
So I don't think women should be forced to do that, right?
You don't think women should be forced to push babies out of their body?
But the baby is in their body, so it's got to come out somehow.
So you're going to take it out with a C-section?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
But I'm trying to figure out what you mean by this.
So that would be forced birth. So she's forced to give and make a viable child, live in the real world.
I mean,
outside of
so
her
when
body.
you're pregnant, the baby's going to come out of you at some point.
That's the
Either
point.
we rip
no
it
matter
apart
what
or
happens,
you give birth
the baby
naturally.
is coming out of the woman, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's no being in favor of that or not. It happens. Period.
Yes.
Okay. So what's your point?
What's my point?
Am I in favor of a natural process by which a woman has to have a baby removed from her no matter what anyone says or does?
Your point is that at 8 or 9 months, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Tim.
You are wrong. Yes, I'll stop you right there because when you keep saying 8 or 9 months, that's not what I said over and over and over again.
Viability is after 6 months.
Viability is
that means that there's more than a 50% chance
you're also wrong. It's not 6 months.
So as soon as the baby
it's not 6 months.
So as soon as the baby is viable, Tim, as soon as the baby is viable, then it's okay for the woman, even if she doesn't want to have it anymore for whatever reason, she should have to be forced to have it extracted from her and then live. Is that correct? Is that your position?
Well, it's not forcing the woman to have a baby live if the baby's already alive. You see what I'm saying? Like,
right. So you're okay.
Here's
semantics.
I got a compromise for you. I got a compromise for you. We'll tell the mother we killed it, but we'll sneak it off and give it to someone else. Does that work for you?
No, because I still think she should have autonomy. She should have the right to do it if she wants to. Of course.
She should kill the baby after it's already born?
I don't want her to kill a baby. I want her to have,
why do you keep saying it?
Because I want her to have the ability to choose. That's different, and that is a fundamental part of this.
The baby's out of her body, right?
Forcibly. In your scenario.
No. Let's say 24 weeks. The woman goes to the doctor and says, I want this baby out of me. And
what if she says, I don't want to have this baby?
I don't want to have this baby. Okay. And the doctor says, I will remove it.
Okay.
Uh-oh, the baby's alive. What do we do?
So you forced her to give birth?
No. She said, doctor, I'd like an abortion. He says, you got it. Step right up.
He's lying to her.
No. He does the abortion and it fails. And
an abortion is terminating a pregnancy. So there's no such thing as a trick abortion. You can't trick.
They're called failed abortions.
Failed abortions?
Yes.
Where doctors trick women into taking the babies out?
No. So when they perform the abortion, as Seamus explained, they stick metal tools into the brain, scramble it up, and rip its body parts apart, and then pull it out chunk by chunk.
Okay.
When the babies are smaller, sometimes they pull them out, but the babies don't die. They survive, right? So my question is, in the instance of a failed abortion, what should be done?
A failed abortion being that the child is living. It's outside of the mother.
Yeah.
At that point, you cannot kill that child. That would be murder.
Oh, okay.
Agreed on that point.
Right.
Yeah.
So then where does the mother's choice come in to kill?
Before that procedure takes place.
So
she has a choice to choose what she wants to have done with her body. If she goes to a doctor and the doctor's like, I'm going to perform an abortion, which the assumption would be that I'm about to terminate the child, but then he just secretly sneaks the child out of there, that's not performing an abortion. You're just being deceptive.
Yeah, and the doctor should go to prison if they did something like that, in my opinion.
I think you go to prison if you should go to prison if he performs an abortion.
Snap.
Yeah,
I heard that. Not
opposite
surprised.
perspective.
So there's also something that none of us know, because I don't think any of us are medical doctors. The difference on the physiology of the female body giving a 9-month abortion, having that happen, or the actual birthing process, whether by C-section or natural birth, it might have vastly different consequences on the female body. So that's something to take into account.
So wait. Remember the Born Alive Act?
Yes.
That was a Republican position, wasn't it? What was that?
Yeah, so there have been a couple of different inside of the mother.
Oh, no, I don't think anything is acceptable, but I think the mother should still have the choice. Ultimate authority over what happens to her body.
But there's a child inside of her body.
Hold on.
and not
What
her.
about meth?
Like, should she be allowed to do meth?
Yeah.
I think if someone is doing meth while they're pregnant, that it is completely acceptable for something like I don't know what the name of the services in the United States.
Child services?
I guess
Child
DCFS
services?
would be.
Oh,
yeah.
it's her body though.
Yeah, it's her body.
If she wants to do meth, what's the big deal?
The big deal is that she's intentionally trying to kill a child.
Hold on there a minute.
Yeah, and I see where we're going.
I don't understand what you're saying. It's her body.
It's her
if
body.
She wants to do meth. What's the problem?
Well, first off, doing meth is illegal, period. Doesn't matter if you're doing it with a child or without a child.
Not in Oregon.
Methylene dioxide, MDMA.
So then they start talking about that a little bit, whether meth is allowed or not. But that's a viral moment when he's like, yeah, because it's killing a child. That's why you can't do meth. But if it's in her body, what do you care? So there's just no consistency here with his position. It's all like just talking points and ideology and things he wants to believe. It's just dogma. And again, Tim Pool said he was in a cult, and he was not wrong in the least bit. I'm gonna jump to they talked about trans issues for a long time. I want to jump to this portion where they talked about Jazz Jennings, because I think this is pretty disturbing and telling.
Is entirely different. It is entirely different from saying we're going to administer puberty blockers because this child feels they're a member of the opposite sex.
But whether
that's an entirely different reason.
Whether or not it's
because you're looking for a different
is going to be the problem, right? You want to know whether or not its use is going to be dangerous on children.
And the reason for administering a certain treatment can render it dangerous. So, for example, if we have been amputating people's limbs for hundreds of years, if I go into a doctor and say, please cut my arm off because I don't want it anymore, and he cuts my arm off, that's medical malpractice. For you to jump in and go, we've been cutting people's arms off for hundreds of years. This is medically approved. People are allowed to do this.
Can I answer this?
Is not, yes, absolutely.
So what you're describing is called BIID, body identity disorder. I forget how it's spelled. It is a real phenomenon.
Dysmorphic.
Yes, it's extremely rare, but we know enough about it at this point to know that people will seek out to get operations on the black market if they have BIID. And what we found when people do that and go into the black market to have a limb removed is that it only provides a temporary amount of relief for their condition, and then it returns and they have further complications from the fact that they now have a disability and or medical complications that come from all that.
My point is not about any kind of body dysmorphia about losing a limb. My point is about drawing a false conclusion by a medical treatment being allowed under circumstance A, but not being allowed under circumstance B. You're saying we allow it for kids who have hit precocious puberty, but then we don't allow it for kids who don't want to go through puberty because they want to be a member of the opposite sex.
It's still not FDA approved. That's different.
But you understand my point. You can't claim those things are the same.
I just Google searched it real quick. Stat in 2017, 100 out of 100 with NewsGuard. Drug used to halt puberty may cause lasting health problems. More than 10,000 adverse event reports were filed with the FDA, reflecting the experience of women who've taken Lupron, describing everything from brittle bones to faulty joints.
Regarding meta-analyses,
I'm worried about, giving kids things on an experimental basis.
Yeah, this is a huge, long conversation, and it would be so awesome to go through each study. I would love to. It would probably take like 7 hours, 6 hours, but we could do it, but like not tonight, unfortunately.
Well, so let me ask you though.
But I want to keep down this path because I think we're making good progress.
Let me ask you.
So just a little context, because I did kind of skip over that portion where they're comparing like getting an appendix removed. He was saying that Lupron has been approved. That's a drug. People are like, that's a chemical castration drug. And he's like, but it's been approved by the FDA. And they're like, bro, just because it's been approved for other things doesn't mean that you should be like, but kids can use it. Like, just because it's for something else doesn't mean that it's okay to give to your like 11, 12-year-olds.
Ask you a question, right? Like Jazz Jennings is sterile, right?
I don't know much about Jazz Jennings.
Jazz Jennings.
She's a reality TV star, right?
Jazz Jennings.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that Jazz isn't trans. Because
that's not for us to say.
I didn't say. I said I'm concerned that Jazz is not trans, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason is Jazz is dating women now, right? So then Jazz would.
What does that have to do with being trans?
Well, Jazz would then be a biological male dating women at the age of 23.
What does that have to do with being trans?
So it has to do with whether or not Jazz made the decision for themselves or the parent made it when they were 3 years old. So the question is, we want to avoid a John Money type situation, right? Where you had these two kids and the doctor told one of the young boys he was actually a girl. and then forced him to live as a girl, ultimately resulting in his suicide and then the death of the brother as well. We don't want that to happen. And so that did happen already, and we know that happened. So we have to be careful about taking a 3-year-old and then raising them and telling them they're female, because then if they start exhibiting traditional, gender behaviors, there may be some concern. For instance, Jazz stopped dilating. And that was the big controversy over the past few weeks, the mother going on TV saying she would force Jazz to do it. If Jazz is saying, I'm not gonna, and the mother saying, do it or I'll wring your neck, which is a quote, and then Jazz is not dating women, we're starting to see a pattern that may be concerning because it follows the John Money situation. Whether or not Jazz is trans or not, my concern is, what if? And that means there may be children who are going to be pushed down a path that ultimately leads to their suicide because their parents can't make the decision for them, but they did.
So the data overwhelmingly shows that if you give children gender affirming care, especially if you have loving and accepting parents who accept children's actual gender identity, it reduces the rates of suicide dramatically. In the case of a parent who affirms their child's gender, it can reduce suicide rates of up to 93% in some studies. It's not a case of more often than not, these are children who are approaching their parents saying they think this is something happening to them, and parents pushing back and being like, no, this is wrong. You're just a tomboy. Oh, this is, this is not you. This is blah, blah, blah. And you don't go into a doctor and all of a sudden they're like, here's Lupron.
They do.
No, but they don't, Tim. The average amount of time. The average amount of time.
You can't say they don't when we've had the anecdotes. They do. Call it an anecdote.
It's an anecdote.
Telling you it does happen.
Of course, but that's an anecdote. We have to look at data.
Don't say
science,
it doesn't
statistics.
happen.
Well, it happens, but that doesn't mean it's a broad
it should
trend.
Not happened.
Right, but that's okay. This is asinine. We have to talk about what actually occurs via the numbers, right? That's what matters. Like I have here the largest U.S. transgender survey ever done. It's in 2015 to 21,598 participants, and this covers people in childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, and it has all the results you're looking for.
So let me ask you a question. Why do you think we're seeing a rapid increase in the past few years?
I can explain that as well.
Of young people identifying as trans.
Okay, can I answer that?
Can you
afterwards?
read the study,
Yeah,
please?
of course. So it shows the 2015 U.S. transgender survey of 20.
So Seamus is gonna rip apart his study and stuff eventually, but I just want to interject and say that the rate of people wanting to unalive themselves and saying that it's different if people are accepting and affirming. There's different stats that you could pull. It's like it's no difference or whatever. But to say that it's better for people, especially if people affirm them, and this idea that they say you have to let them do the transition or they're gonna unalive themselves, and after they do it, they're like, well, you have to affirm them or they still might unalive themselves. It doesn't sound like you made anyone better. It doesn't sound like you made anyone better. It sounds like you put like a Band-Aid over a dam and you're hoping that the thing won't break down. So when people say, like, I'm going to be able to play all this like segment and stuff. And I'll maybe, I want to get to the end, so I'm probably gonna have to summarize the Jazz portions of it and stuff. But he'll say like, what does it matter? If people want to go ahead and do this and live their lives, etc. But they do expect like society participation of people who decide to go and be transgender, and they expect you to go along and play along with their self-perception, because if you don't, they will say that they'll plant this expectation that this is what they do, that they'll unalive themselves, and kind of give them a villain to point the finger to, because you and the rest of society wouldn't look at somebody who was clearly a man and be like, they're a beautiful bold woman. Like, we're not helping people. We're not, like, especially not getting to the root and the heart of a lot of issues. And so the reason why I jumped to this Jazz section, if someone was to watch it later, we started watching it from an hour and 35 minutes in. But he's going to press him like, why do you think Jazz stopped dilating? And he's going to deflect and be like, why do you want to, it's weird that you want to talk about genitals. And Tim's just going to be like, not want to play the games, like, bro, like, you're deflecting. And Tim eventually just kind of comes out and says, do you like, or because he mentions that Jazz doesn't have sexual feeling anymore. And he asked like, why do you think that he got the bottom surgery? And he said he doesn't know. He said he was to affirm his, how he was. And so Tim's just kind of like, don't you think he had like the surgery to be able to have, sex like a way that a similar way that a woman does or whatever? And now he has no feeling. And he kind of seemed like he didn't care, like it wasn't a big deal. And Tim noted that in other countries where people forcibly have, their feelings removed, or they do like different kind of surgery on women, so they can't enjoy sexual pleasure, then that's torture. So this fact that you could have a child who will go through these surgeries and stuff and be transitioned basically from the age of 3 in the public eye, and there will be books that say I am Jazz to try to inspire a generation to do something similar, and now they can't enjoy sexual pleasure. That's a problem, but he seemed like totally kind of unfazed and uncaring about it. And like that's their choice to do that sort of thing. But as Tim kept noting, a child can't consent to something like that. So it was very weird that he didn't want to process that it was a bad thing that he's done this to his body. And like it was his, you could say it was his choice, but I mean he did it when he was 17, but the mother has done a great harm to her child for sure. And then he got offended because Tim called his vagina a wound, and he's like, I'm not trying to like be a jerk about it, like I'm trying to be medical, like appropriate, like it is a wound. Why do you think you have to keep dilating? I promise you I don't have to keep dilating my vajayjay. It just is as it is. But if you're trans, you like Jazz has to keep like dilating, so it's open there, so it doesn't close up. It's like you get your ears pierced. If you don't keep putting earrings in, that hole will close up. So, but it was just kind of like, they live how they want to live. It's not, they make their decisions, and Tim is looking like for a long-term harm that can be done. So I'm way over where I wanted to be. So I'm going to jump to this super chat section where they asked about mandates. Because remember, he talked about bodily autonomy and all this stuff. So someone in the super chat, thank you, person who asked this question. How did he feel about mandates? And he's Canadian, so I bet my bottom dollar he probably voted for Trudeau. But
woman who's had an abortion and given.
Oh, when there was a vaccination. Of the people on this panel, they've been very friendly and very nice to me, and they put me in a nice hotel. And Ian is just as friendly in real life as everyone led him to believe.
I'm going to the moon.
So
if you did.
let me. Here's one from Marby Doug. He says, "Please ask your guest if he feels the same about bodily autonomy with regards to the vaccines."
Yeah, I think you should have the right, whether or not you want to take the vaccine.
So you would disagree with the vaccine mandate?
A forcible vaccine mandate? I mean, for the purposes of freedom, yes, but it sucks. That's one of those, like, it sucks, but of course, I don't think people should be forced to have to take a jab against their will.
Like if the government said in order to go to
government
school,
like a government mandated vaccine program, I disagree with, in that like every single human being is like strapped down and like, oh, I don't want to take it, but you have to, kind of thing.
So I don't like this gaslighting, because now people will pretend like no one was forced to get vaccinated because we weren't held down and had some kind of person jab us in the arm. That they're like, nobody forced you to do it. And even Trudeau, we talked about this like a week or two ago, is just kind of trying to walk back, like things weren't that hard in Canada, things weren't that difficult, etc. Things were definitely difficult there. Things were definitely difficult here. There are people who are worried about their jobs, whether they're going to have jobs. The OSHA mandates were ridiculous. They didn't make any sense, especially because if you got the jab, you could still spread the virus. But they wanted you to, if you weren't jabbed, then they were going to make sure that you were tested like every week or something, which probably would have came out of your own pocket. And those tests aren't cheap, and how inflation and stuff was going, and stuff was definitely starting to add up. So you have to maybe pay for it. There was no requirement that your employer paid for it. And there was, but if you can have the vaccine and you can still spread COVID, why weren't they making everyone get tested? Why just the people who weren't vaxxed? especially, and have no consideration for natural immunity if you already had the vaccine. I mean, already had the virus. The reason being is because they just wanted you to take it. They wanted to make you take it. That's all. And Canada had a high participation rate, like when they started like really, really doing some lockdowns. I remember covering it. I'm like, if they have all these people who are already jabbed in Quebec and all these other places, why are they doing all these harsh mandates? Like, at what point in time is herd immunity going to jump in here? Especially when you consider people who already have had COVID. They just wanted to make you take it. So he's doing the nobody like held you down and stuff. That's not what we mean. Like, you made it very difficult to live in a society. And know what? No one is strapping you down and saying that you have to have a baby. But you know what? If you made a baby, you can't just unmake the fact that you made a baby. So when we say, like, the pro-life position is they can both live, let them live, let's do nothing. Let's let the natural progression of life, of your bodily functions happen. If everything is copacetic and natural and good and healthy, let it happen how it's supposed to happen. His position is if a mother wants to kill it in the 9th month, you gotta screw up its skull and scramble its brains and rip it apart. That's his position because of her bodily autonomy. But if you don't want a vaccine, you got to take it. But we'll let him talk a little bit more.
But you would be okay with like every facet of society saying we require vaccines?
Oh, when there was a vaccination, like what was the word for it? Like a segregation of people who were vaccinated and unvaccinated.
Well, like, you oppose the government holding you down and vaccinating you.
Yes, I think you should have a choice whether or not you should do that. But other people should have a choice whether or not they get sick from you because you didn't vaccinate yourself.
Do you think the government should be allowed to mandate?
Okay. So you should be mandated to have the vaccine, or they should coerce you into it, to pressure you to do it. Because no one has the right to not get sick from you, which I don't know how you can kind of can guarantee that right, but you can do all sorts of terrible things that were done over the past couple of years to people. No, we did not forget, and you can justify that because some stranger might get sick and could possibly die. I mean, that's a fact of the matter. People were catching it, and there were people who were dying, especially if you were elderly and you had comorbidities and stuff. There were elderly people who did survive. There are people who with comorbidities who absolutely like didn't even like have symptoms hardly or whatever. So there was a range of things that happened. However, if bodily autonomy in his position ends because someone might get sick, so therefore you have to take the risk of the jab. Because it does come with risk. There are people who die. There are people who, I know somebody who had a heart attack. I heard of someone who lost their limb because there was a blood clot that they had, so they had to get their leg amputated. I know people a friend of mine from Canada was tested allergic to every single ingredient in it, and the doctor still would not give him a pass or whatever, because an exemption, because they weren't doing that. Whatever reason, there were doctors who felt like pressured to not give people exemptions. So what did they do? Because his job, he worked in the medical field, he was going to lose his job, a good paying job that he worked his whole life to get, if he didn't get that vaccine. So they did an IV drip like slowly into his system, and they're like giving him like stuff for his allergic reactions as he's taking the jab. That is crazy. You could have just gave the man a darn exemption, but they didn't even want to do it. So people pretending like the government just didn't hold you down, so it wasn't force. You're playing games, but they can do all this stuff and justify it because you might get someone sick. But you can't say, hey, a woman's bodily autonomy ends with her abortion. She can't have one because she's deliberately killing a specific person who happens to be her child. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any darn sense in the least bit. So I can't go through life pretending like people care about bodily autonomy, like the government cares about our bodily autonomy, and Biden can get up and say a woman has a right to do this. When I remember when it was a vaccine, and he said this isn't, in mandates, he said this isn't about freedom and this isn't about your personal choice. That is a quote from the president of the United freaking States. So I can't pretend like these people care about bodily autonomy and a woman's choice, her right to choose, that she should be able to make her own decisions. She could make her own decisions when she was providing for her family and wanted to go to work and take care of her kids. No, you got arrested if you stepped out of line and you weren't deemed essential. They don't care about those things for whatever reason. You know, Rush Limbaugh would say that leftism is a religion and abortion is their sacrament, and they'll do anything to protect it, but they don't care about bodily autonomy. Please do not lie to me. Please don't lie to me.
Mandate vaccines for public accommodation.
Yeah, for certain things, of course. Like, we already do that for hospitals. You have to be vaccinated if you're a nurse or a doctor against a host of different things for obvious medical reasons. And I think that serves an important purpose.
So
same thing with the military. The military is mandatory vaccination for the same reasons.
But so your line is bodily autonomy, but not participation in society.
Well, you can choose whether or not to be a doctor. You can choose whether or not to be in the military.
Well, I mean, like going to a cafe or a movie or something, right?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying that there are certain things where it makes sense from a scientific standpoint, where, like, if you're a doctor or nurse, yeah, that probably is something that you should
what
be
about going to the
vaccinated for.
movies?
It depends if that is directly going to have an impact on the broader society if people get sick writ large.
But that means no bodily autonomy.
No, bodily autonomy
Like
up to a point. You can choose whether or not to go to the movies. That's your choice. You can choose whether or not to join the military.
So that's my point, right? You don't agree with the government holding you down, but you do agree with the government excising you from society.
We already accept this. The government does that in a variety of ways already.
Right. So the limit is
We already live in that
Madison
society.
Square Garden, for instance, had a vaccine requirement, and I think Joe Rogan had to refund tickets because he said at the show before the requirement, and it was the government that imposed the requirement on all the businesses. So the vaccine mandate, there's two ways to look at it. I think what they're asking is ostracizing or excising someone from society is a vaccine mandate, right? Restricting someone's ability
you have a choice to do it whether you want to or not. It's whether or not you can have convenience and pleasure in society. And it's obviously a big inconvenience if you don't get to go to see Madison Square Garden, of course. So, but this is a by case basis as well, right?
The government can pressure you to do it. They can take away
pressure, for sure,
privileges and access until you do it.
As a matter of public safety, we already allow this. The government does this in a variety of ways for a ton of different things.
I get concerned about that phrase public safety because if they're like, this common cold is very...
Yeah. So I wish someone would have brought back the abortion debate, but no one, I don't think that anybody else did. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So yeah. He doesn't believe in absolute bodily autonomy. And you know what? There was a Supreme Court case that deemed that you could do vaccinations back in the day, and because bodily autonomy does have limits and it's not absolute. And I think we all agree with that. Like, your bodily autonomy doesn't give you the right to cause harm to someone else just because you use your bodily autonomy to do that. But why is that logic not applied to abortion? Like he's saying, you have other choices. You don't have to go participate in society. You don't have to work at a hospital. You don't have to go to the movies. You don't have to go to Madison Square Garden. Oh, you also don't have to get pregnant. You also don't have to have sex. You can also choose to use your birth control. About half of women who have abortions aren't on any sort of contraception at the time when they actually get pregnant. So that's alarming. Or you could you could just, wait it out 9 months. You could just wait it out 9 months. You will have there will be a time when a baby will not be in you in a couple months. I've never been pregnant. Probably the first time when it's in there probably seems like every pregnancy is different, but I remember when my sister was pregnant with her first son, Daniel, and like right before she had him, which he was born early. I think if it was a couple days earlier, he would have been premature actually. But she was saying he's so big, I can't imagine him getting any bigger. And now she's just like a pro. And she says when she's not pregnant, she misses the feeling of actually being pregnant. So she loves her kids, and we all love our kids, and they're a great joy to all of our lives. But and I know not everybody is as joyful as her or other women when they experience pregnancy, but The fact of the matter, when the baby exists, it exists. So something that was interesting about his whole kind of philosophy, there was he said that, you know, if he would have never thought to do something if someone was crazy on a train and potentially could have hurt like everybody else or a guest or whatever to choke hold them or whatever. And maybe he said that because of the potential of death. But again, he already admitted that if you're going to do some kind of physical action, you can't guarantee that something couldn't go wrong and someone would end up dead. But he said he would have just never thought of I guess operating that kind of defense for himself or other people. When it came to abortion, it's just like whatever her choice is, it's her choice, doesn't matter. There was no logic. You guys watched it. There was no logic to what he was saying. And the trans debate, which we didn't get a chance to watch a lot of that, but if you go back and watch it, like a lot of it is like that it's their choice. If they do that, that's their decision. They should be able to do that, whatever. When it got to the mandates, it's a different thing because you could potentially harm me. So that's when I have to aggress upon you, and it's totally cool that the government comes down on you, etc. So it's a lot of I don't care about. There's a lot of false virtue of pretending to care about people or saying. No, I shouldn't say pretend. I believe they care about people, but here's a big difference here. They're like very, very into the self-gratification of now, and other people like Tim or Seamus or myself, we're thinking about what's going to happen down the line. Like Tim is concerned about creating more John Money situations where we have kids who feel pressured because of their parents or whatever, or they're socially conditioned to be trans and they're not really trans and they're harming themselves. And I'm concerned about the repercussions of culturally what we're going to do to our society, where everyone is basically bullied into acknowledging something that isn't true. That's very concerning to me. It's concerning to me that we, you know, not only that we kill about 1 million babies in our country every year, but how we've conditioned ourselves, and the man is like cobwebs in his brain, like how he's trying to describe like his position. There was no real consistency with it, really. Didn't make any sense other than the woman wants violence, let the violence happen. But I'm concerned about our society and how we got twisted up to the point of accepting that, of women being in the position where they feel like they need to have an abortion, or being in that position where it could be super, super, super late and they could just have the baby, but they don't want to. So it's okay to kill it, even though at that point it could be viable, and everyone to be okay with that doesn't make sense. Like, I'm concerned about the societal harm of abortion. I wrote an article about that on my website. Don't have time to really break that down. But Mike Winger is a preacher, and he did I saw a short that popped up the other day, and he talked about how, you know, he's counseled a lot of people with marriages and people who are in like abuse situations. And he said like something that's consistent with abusers and stuff is that they really they don't have a long-term focus about how their actions are going to impact relationships and people later. They only think about what it's going to do today, right now. So if people are like, that's how they feel, like, just accept them, just affirm them. That's what she wants. Just let her have the abortion, you know, even though like 20 years down the line, she could regret it. There's so many women who I know who talk about the regret stories, and people say it doesn't matter. Just let the woman choose. It's like, and they'll even call them hypocrites because you get to make a choice. How come I can't make a choice? So like they're trying to give you some knowledge. They're trying to help you to not make a mistake, and to acknowledge your feelings and to process what you're doing and the possible repercussions of the future and how this could harm you, not just the child, but how it could harm you later. And people don't want to hear that because they're only focused on the now. And I think that's a really big difference between the guys on the panel versus Lance. And I think maybe that's a big difference right now, what we're seeing for people who are implementing things that are going to tear down our society versus people who want to keep building on our foundation and making sure that we preserve it in some kind of way. So I thought that was a fascinating look into the mind of someone who's a leftist. And it was a wild ride for sure. So if you want to go back and watch the whole thing, you can watch the whole thing. But I hope you guys enjoyed my commentary when I interjected and stuff. But that was wild. That was wild. I only intended on really watching the abortion portion when I first started it, but I totally watched the whole thing because it was madness. It was madness. But anyway, I gotta let you go. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different content on my website, different articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Costs a stream, costs to run my website, all that good stuff. So if you can support in that way, I very much appreciate it. If you can't, thank you guys for watching. That really does help. Also check out different merch in my store. That also helps as well, like the Be Better Not Better shirt's really cool. I promise I will have more merch soon. My book just like totally took up so much of my life. My book, Of Course God is Blatantly Against Abortion, that's available right now on Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and it covers biology, it covers rights, it covers philosophy, and it goes into theology. So go ahead and you can buy it now in paperback, or you can get it on Kindle. So go ahead and pick it up. So you can do Barnes & Noble, you can do Amazon. So if I don't think I have the link today in my, but if you go to blacktnews.com, you'll be able to find it. Just go to like books and hit the button, or it might just be right on the homepage. So, or you can just search my name, Christina L. Barr, on Amazon. I did release another book too. That's a sequel to Phases of a Broken Sky. Most of my books are fiction. I have 2 non-fiction books now, but here's a picture with me with 15 of my books. Now I have 17. So I will, once I get some more of my books in the mail, I will have to take a new photo with all my babies. So go ahead and check out what I write. So God bless you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.